Tom, it's hot as balls in the UK right now, and I genuinely think my recording booth could be legally classified as a torture device. No, Ramsey, it's not for sale. Was the Red Wedding a good idea? Oh, so we're going to trade in the physical torture, that is the current British weather, for the emotional torture of the most traumatic event in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, as written by our favourite author George R.R. Martin. Yes, my friends, we're going to take a look at the Red Wedding. A Machiavellian masterstroke, or a misguided misstep? Like, subscribe, Discord here, Patreon here, let's just dive in, Tom. One is already taking a bath in one's own sweat. On the surface, the Red Wedding can almost come across as a slam dunk for the ones who orchestrated it. It appears to end the most bloody aspect of the War of the Five Kings and takes the biggest military threat to the crown out of the equation, that being the combined strength of the fucking North and the Riverlands, without needing to deplete the perpetrator's own military resources in any significant manner. The mass killing of Northerners neutered the last flames of the military power base of the one kingdom that is, for the most part, heavily unified in its loyalty to its Lord Paramount, has a historically hard stance on justice and a famously good memory. It reunifies all the realms apart from the Iron Islands, but who gives a fuck about them anyway? Back under the thumb of the Iron Throne, at least in name. It also allowed Tywin to focus on mending a fractured realm, while Roose, and to a lesser degree that fucking rat Walder, moved up in the world by stepping onto the blood-stained pedestals they themselves helped to ensure were vacated through this massacre. And as a bonus prize, as far as Tywin knows, with no living heirs, he owns the true key to the North via his forcibly marrying Tyrion and Sansa. Ultimately, it stemmed the bleeding by ending the war in one swift stroke. It can't be denied. But it's in the aftermath of this bloody event we see things aren't quite as simple as, and everything goes back to normal. And George reignites the feud between ruthlessness and honor and which holds more power. Actions have consequences, and boy, these are some monumentally impactful actions. In fact, they tore at the very fabric of the status quo. It's easy to look at what the perpetrators achieved and say, yes, this was a masterstroke of cunning, minimal investment and maximum return. Tywin is one of the greatest players of all time. But you can only really do this if you ignore the cost of pulling off such devious depravity devoid of decency and the inevitable consequences. The massacre causes long-term resentment, and actually destabilizes the realm further by replacing the large fractures between the kingdoms involved in the conflict with large fractures within them. Initially, this seems like a win for Tywin. Regions bicker within themselves rather than with each other, keeping everyone nice and weak and unable to rise up as a singular kingdom to threaten the crown's dominance again. But this is acknowledging the short-term gain while ignoring the long-term cost. Tywin's newly installed and widely hated liege lords have left the door open for outsiders like Stannis, Dany or Fagon to unify the resistances within them, and gain favour in supporting their claims to the throne, who could then, down the line, be a much greater threat to the Lannisters and the crown than Robb's war, which was, at the end of the day, starting to become unwinnable for him. And this isn't even the gravest mistake made by executing this massacre. With the atrocious breaking of guest right, Walder, Roose and Tywin made a clear as day statement to many of the surviving players who would normally play by the rules.
All bets are off.
We're already seeing this with Roose and Walder. Because of the Red Wedding and this event alone, both have made their way onto several shit lists. And as of the last book, the pieces are starting to fall into place that will ultimately spell their doom. Walder and the Freys have found themselves not only reviled in the public eye as they were the ones who took the official blame, but also in the crosshairs of Lady Stoneheart and her band of not-so-merry men. Not to mention the Blackfish actually escapes the siege of Riverrun in the books, and somehow I don't think he's done trying to fuck the rats over. Roose has just about every ass in the North gunning for him, because they saw straight through his bullshit. The Grand Northern Conspiracy is an intricate web of individual plots and schemes. But you already know this because, statistically speaking, odds are good you've watched Alt-Shift-X's rather excellent video on the topic. While each plot has their own small differing objectives, one primary objective persists throughout. Take down the Boltons, restore the stacks. Or at least just take down the Boltons. And both have earned the vengeful eyes of the big man with the pies, Wyman Manderley, whose mama's farce is almost at an end. Oh, Manderley's just so fucking awesome. Easily the best Northerner still alive in the series, and I will die on that hill. Roose is all but counting on his army being the biggest, the encroaching winter, and the Northerners being too battered and tired to rise up and fight him. And Walder is leaning hard on Lannister military support in claiming his ill-gotten gains. Both are oblivious to the fact that their enemies are not playing by those old rules anymore. The swords in front of them have been sheathed. The daggers behind them have been drawn. But you guys know this stuff. It's obvious Roose and Walder are going down. And ultimately, that was the point. They are the scapegoats. What Tom actually wanted to cover is the man who greenlit the plan. Hey, you made that rhyme, Tom. Was the Red Wedding a good idea for Tywin and the Lannisters? As a plan on paper, yes, absolutely. He eliminates his enemy without risking further losses to his army, cripples the North and Riverlands so they can't rise up against him anytime soon, keeps his image clean in the public eye, and shifts the blame onto someone else. In reality and execution, no. Sorry, Tywin fanboys, no it wasn't. The Red Wedding is often used as the prime example of Tywin's political genius and cunning, when in reality, it exposes the flaws of his character, his inability to see the big picture, and stands as a testament as to why he is a highly capable leader, yet because of those flaws in his character, will never stand in the same league as someone like Littlefinger, who, by the way, managed to basically do the same thing, but much cleaner. Tywin veers much closer to narcissism and is at the mercy of his deep-seated insecurities, his raw emotions, and his self-image. The question you've got to ask is, was this Tywin's only option? At this point in the conflict, Robb is on the back foot. His army is diminished for attrition and his own foolish mistakes, and he's kind of at a point where he needs to cut his losses, retreat to the north, and retake it from the Ironborn. Tywin, on the other hand, is stronger than ever. He's got the support of the Reach and most of the Stormlands, and his two-front war has turned singular thanks to the dirty rotten ganging up on the Manus at Blackwater. We will make them pay, my king. He absolutely has the strength to push Robb back and hand the young wolf the L through sheer overwhelming might, forcing him to stand and die or skulk home to lick his wounds with an army that's too small to be a real threat anytime soon, having been reduced from the initial 20,000 to around 10k, traitors included.
You fucked it, young wolf! So much promise, so much talent, and you fucked it! And for what?
Oh, right, fair enough. Yes, it would have taken longer, yes, it would have been more costly on manpower and resources, and yes, potentially leaving Robb alive is a point of concern. Fair's fair, each one of these is a problem and a headache Tywin can solve right here, right now, by killing Robb and his loyal bannermen in one night. If Robb is allowed to retreat back to the north, then the Lannisters either have to sail to the north or make their way through Moat Cailin. And no one wants that because...
Ooh, spooky swamp wizards!
Neither of these things are ideal. Takes time and money, and you've still got the Riverlands to tidy up. If Tywin could have kept Robb locked into the Riverlands on the wrong side of the Twins until his and the Reach's army could make its way north, then maybe it's a different conversation. But that's a lot of work and logistics, and Robb still may well fall back to Riverrun or escape through Seaguard. This makes the Red Wedding just that much more appealing to just cut off the wolf's head now rather than leave it it for later. Remember, the menace is in the wings, and Robb may reconsider bending at this point to get back into the fight, because he certainly wasn't going to surrender. Like, ever. Robb living is also problematic regardless. As previously mentioned, Tywin married Tyrion to Sansa with the idea of bringing the North back into the fold that way. By sitting a Lannister on the seat of Winterfell, you've sort of kneecapped a lot of northern resistance, because technically, a Stark will be in Winterfell. Robb living means that any Lannister can't take the seat, and any heirs Robb produces will supersede a child born from Tyrion and Sansa. Letting Robb go, a man who has just called himself king and can set up defenses to make your life the seven hells, refer back to
Ooh, spooky swamp wizard,
is just not pragmatic when you want to close the show. But it can be argued doing it the hard way would have at least preserved the integrity of the Lannister name, something Tywin is very much about, which would be utterly decimated if their involvement in the massacre was exposed. Tywin is smart enough to know that, so why risk it? Why greenlight something that could see your house name dragged through the mud before ultimately being burnt to the ground? Simply put, Tywin's arrogance, ego, and childish little man syndrome gets the better of him. He's been slighted and, let's face it, embarrassed by the young wolf on the battlefield. It's not enough to simply push Robb back. He has to crush him. The Red Wedding isn't a carefully calculated strategic decision.
I'm sorry, Tywin fanboys, it's just not.
It's Tywin peacocking his ruthlessness while hiding behind two friends and hoping it creates enough fear to keep the beaten down in line. Which it doesn't. I do want to take a moment to point out, though, that Tywin isn't a complete idiot in this situation and clearly considers his position, taking what measures he can to distance himself and his house name from the grisly affair, hence the scapegoating of Walder and Roose. Using Walder is a particular stroke of brilliance, as it allows the Red Wedding to hide under the guise of vengeful Freys enacting petty vengeance on Robb for breaking his marriage oath, rather than a war crime committed by the Crown. Sure, Tywin's got plausible deniability in being directly involved, and the Freys have taken the official blame. But either way, people highly suspect Tywin's involvement. Blackfish, Stoneheart, even the small folk in King's Landing suspect. Word is somehow getting around of the Lion's involvement, and that vile stain on the Frey name is slowly spilling over onto Lannister. How people know is up for debate. Perhaps Tywin and Walder's reputations precede them, and people can't see the spineless Walder committing such a crime, but know it's bread and butter for Tywin. Perhaps people are just putting two and two together. The Lannisters benefited more than anyone else.
Pretty suspicious coincidence.
It's also probably not a stretch to assume the Freys have let things slip amidst their wacky stories of Werewolf Robb. It's a big family, gossip probably travels fast. And just how many people heard Roose say,
Jaime Lannister sends his regards.
It also didn't help that Tywin publicly rewarded the Freys with political marriages, lands, and river run, instead of, condemning the Freys' abhorrent crimes publicly and providing more subtle tokens of gratitude. Not his wisest move. There is also one moment in the actual wedding itself that ensured Tywin was strongly implicated that I don't think gets addressed enough. The music.
We all know the song that initiates the massacre. Do-do-do-do-do-do.
This is either a brilliant move on Walder's part, effectively dragging Tywin's involvement into the event without directly saying it, and allowing his men to let slip this little detail, or Tywin's ego is at work, and he just can't let his foes meet their maker without knowing he was the harbinger of it. Either way, a stupid decision of Tywin to either trust in honor among thieves, or to willingly implicate himself. Some people do survive the massacre, and doesn't it just seem to write itself to have a scene with a freed Greatjon saying something along the lines of, I was incredibly drunk. I don't remember much, but the rains. I remember the rains. And this brings us back round to the question. Ultimately, Was the Red Wedding a mistake? For Roose and Walder, absolutely no fucking doubt. Those traitorous a-holes are going down. For the Lannisters, it remains to be seen. Tywin's dead, and the Lannisters are already falling apart due to other factors. So karma's already kind of making them pay for it. On one hand, it was an expedient, cost-effective end to a costly war, which sets up the potential of a loyal Lannister on the seat of Winterfell. The Lannisters do still kind of hold their power, their enemies are out of reach, and currently in no position to retaliate conventionally anytime soon. But on the other, despite a solid effort to keep their name out of it, Lannister seems to be picking up the same stain as Frey in the court of public opinion, something that holds more weight in a medieval society than our own. And because of the underhanded nature of the massacre, they have, in a sense, permitted their rivals to ignore the rules as they did. Their plausible deniability means fuck all. Do you honestly think their enemies want justice through due process? Who do you think they're dealing with, Ned Stark? Fundamentally, it's Tywin's outlook of the event that truly marks it as an error. He views it as a decisive blow, something he can wash his hands of. He's destroyed houses before, such as House Rain, and felt no repercussions. But it's easier done when it's to a direct vassal compared to the head of a great house who are beloved by their people, turning that killing blow into a wounding strike, with the wolf pack now surrounding the head wolf in an effort to protect it. Funnily enough, both me and Tom disagree on whether or not the Red Wedding was a good idea or a grave mistake. Tom and Liam not agreeing? Shocking headline news! Tom is very pro-Tywin, with the arguments it ended the war and the Starks and Riverlands gaining any sort of justice in the current Lannisters' lifetime being laughable. Winter is literally coming. They've got to survive that first before mounting any threat to the Lannisters. In a sense, the timing favors the Lannisters. It's too late. I mean, the Lannister responsible for it all is also dead, so it's too late in that sense as well. Whilst I, on the other hand, think it's full of short-term thinking and ego getting the better of the old lion. If, and only if, Tywin had managed to keep his prince off of the massacre in entirety, it would go down as one of the cleanest and most masterful moves in Westerosi history. But the fact he didn't recognize just how many moving parts there were to this plan, and the inability to kill everyone involved means he can't keep his name off it despite his best efforts, just shows it as the rash, ill-thought-out, short-sighted, heavy-handed blunder it ultimately was. I can already hear Littlefinger and Varys tutting in the shadows. Those guys understand that if you want to pull something like this off and keep your hands totally clean, you've got to keep it small and precise like a knife, and your collaborators need to be as smart as you are. And this is why Tywin is not in their league. One, he's a far more public figure, so stuff like this is already harder and requires an even more subtle touch due to his public image. But don't use that to excuse him, he exacerbates it with the way his strikes are always with a sledgehammer, and his conspirators are always intellectually beneath him, and dumb enough to compromise both themselves and Tywin. With maybe the exception for Roose. You know, fair's fair, Roose is pretty smart. I think the Lions will be the last ones standing for sure, but what good is that when the fall is almost inevitable? It again circles us back to George's themes of honor and ruthlessness, and which ultimately holds more power. Ruthlessness and pragmatism always initially looks like it's the way to go. But it's only later down the line you realize honor is not a fool's prize. It's merely patient. But instead of me and Tom keeping this bickering to ourselves, let's extend the argument to you, our viewers. Was the Red Wedding a stroke of brilliance, or the key that locked in its perpetrator's doom?